Secretary of the Forum of ESCAP. Please come forward. Maybe you take your plates and sit closer.
So we'll take maybe a couple of minutes more.
While participants are coming forward to the room, we will take a few minutes more. But I would like to encourage you to come a little closer.
Work. The scale and severity of violence against women and girls in the region is unacceptable. It threatens our ability to achieve several of the SDGs. For example, school-related gender-based violence contributes to girls' poor educational performance, higher dropout rates, and costs low and middle income countries about $17 billion annually. Applying key levers of change to advancing gender equality, such as innovative financing and technology, will be key to catalyzing inclusive and sustainable prosperity in Asia and the Pacific, especially as emerging technological breakthroughs such as artificial intelligence significantly change the future of work for women. However, as the minister from Pakistan yesterday mentioned during lunchtime, the anticipated job losses from emerging technologies will disproportionately burden women. Governments must think carefully about the role and scope of such technologies to ensure they are able to advance gender equality while simultaneously developing a workforce fit for the future. Since ILO has a huge project to look into the artificial intelligence and technological breakthroughs and their impact on the future of work, perhaps ESCAP could focus more on the impact on the gender for Asia-Pacific region. ESCAP works closely with countries in the region to advance gender equality and the SDGs in 4 key ways. First, through enhancing evidence-based policy formulation, ESCAP conducts in-depth research and analysis on critical enablers of gender inequality, including women's economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, transformative leadership, as well as opportunities and challenges that address the gender-environment nexus. Second, through strengthening institutional capacities, ESCAP provides technical capacity development to member states through programs such as ESCAP's Women in ICT Frontier Initiative, or Wi-Fi, implemented by APCICT, one of the ESCAP's regional institutes, benefiting from the generosity of the Korean authorities. It's located in Incheon. Third, through working to increase financing capacities for gender equality, to promote sustainable financing, to achieve the 2030 agenda, ESCAP supports countries to effectively apply the key principles of gender-responsive budgeting in their budget cycles. To this end, ESCAP has provided tailored capacity building services to Cambodia, China, and Lao PDR to equip policymakers with knowledge and practical skills to integrate gender concerns into national planning and budgetary processes. Fourth, my favorite topic, through enhancing financial inclusion, which is definitely changing the scene. I have been very closely involved in this, not only during my multilateral career, but more so in context of Pakistan. Amongst the many specific constraints women entrepreneurs face, access to finance and credit. 69% of women-owned SMEs in developing countries are unserved or underserved by financial institutions. So like Pakistan had dedicated microfinance banks that were introduced, but other countries have done very interesting things like Bangladesh Grameen Institution and BRAC also. To tackle the financing challenges faced by women entrepreneurs, ESCAP works to ensure gender-responsive policies for SME development. ESCAP engages with financial institutions to increase women's access to credit and financial services and boost women's access to market information, social networks, and services through harnessing ICT. Finally, ESCAP's partnership with a range of stakeholders will help boost collective action to achieve gender equality. For example, ESCAP and UN Women have successfully collaborated to promote gender statistics, enabling systematic progress in developing the requisite monitoring and accountability mechanisms to support the implementation of the SDGs. To conclude, we must not be complacent about the 2030 deadline to realize gender equality through the SDGs. We cannot afford to progress on development gains made so far, and we must continue to build momentum in successfully completing the task at hand. There's a lot that I've not been able to cover in this short presentation, but there is a much more detailed presentation, and also we did a gender brief which will be handy. I hope that that is being circulated. So by prioritizing gender equality and upholding women's rights, we are laying the building blocks for an Asia-Pacific region that values people, planet, and prosperity. Let us not miss this window of opportunity to take bold and transformative steps in this collective journey to achieve equality between women and men for creating a better future for all. Wherever I have gone during my term, I have tried to talk to the leaders about it, and I distinctly remember me going to Pacific Islands, where I had the privilege to meet all the leaders, 14 of them or so, that fall under our jurisdiction. And at that time, there was not even a single women leader. So I requested some of the leaders that it's high time they step down to allow some women leaders. And there are very competent women out there in the Pacific, and one of them is from Samoa here, Simi, who I have had the opportunity to meet. And since I see her right there, I thought I will flag that she is one of those who has accomplished a lot too. So thank you very much to all of you for being here, in particular our panelists who I know that I have handpicked also, some of them, and I very much appreciate their taking the time to come out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Akhtar. From one powerful woman in the Asia Pacific, I now hand over the floor to another powerful woman, Dr. Sharman Stone. She is Australia's ambassador for women and girls. She will be the moderator of the high-level panel discussion on gender equality and empowerment of women and girls, a pathway to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. May I request the other panelists to now take their seats? And Dr. Stone, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Patricia, you need to, it's quite tricky getting up here, everybody, because there's a very small gap behind these chairs. We need smaller chairs or smaller panellists. So thank you very much, everybody who's still in this chamber. We're a bit scattered now. If anyone wants to shift up closer to the front, despite being behind a different country's name, just feel free to do that. I'm Sharman Stone. I am the Australian Ambassador for Women and Girls. I just started in January, and I'm the third of those ambassadors in that position. And it's an honour and a privilege to moderate this panel. I want to also, oh, she's gone, but thank our Executive Secretary. There she is, over there, who very rightly has championed the notion of a panel which specifically addresses the gender equity issues. And can I say it's going to come as a surprise and a shock, I think, to lots of people. But this is the fourth forum we've had on Sustainable Development Goals in an Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, the fourth, and this is the first, which has had a specific dedicated session on gender issues. All due to Madam.
Late than never.
Indeed, indeed. And I want to thank the number of men who are with us in the chamber, because we need obviously champion women, but without our champion men, we're not going to succeed in having a global equality movement which sees no girl born at a disadvantage simply because of her gender, wherever she may have been born, whatever country. Now, the object of this panel, and we're going to have a little bit of time through till about 12:30, is to generate new perspectives on the catalytic role that gender equality and women's empowerment can play. You know, what in particular can women do in achieving the socio-economic and environmental outcomes that the SDGs demand, and indeed human society demands? What in particular are the catalytic roles that gender plays? The second is to identify innovative strategies. What is new? What is key that we can do? Because we haven't done much good in the last 10,000 years of women's equality. What can we do going forward to empower and strengthen women's roles so we in fact can implement the SDGs? And thirdly, we want to strengthen dialogues and partnerships through the women and the gentlemen who are on this panel, and those of you who are in this chamber who've shown by your presence here right now that you understand the incredibly important role, especially in Indo-Asia Pacific, of women as they partner with men in whatever society to deliver a better world of peace, security, economic empowerment and less conflict. So we've got such a distinguished panel here, and I want to again compliment our Secretary-General, who, as she said, handpicked a number of these panellists, knowing their background. I want to give you a very short introduction to each of them, and then we'll move to a set of questions which each panellist will answer individually. We're hoping for questions from the floor. Now, that's often a bit tricky with translation and so on. We don't have translators. But if anyone has a burning question from the floor, please see there's an opportunity to ask those. And then we'll have a second round of responses from the panellists. Hopefully we've got time before we'll then finally move on to the statements from countries. But let me introduce our panel. I'll introduce their full title initially, but like women and particularly Australians, we use first names. We're all the sisterhood and the brotherhood, and we're all friends here. So, can I begin by introducing immediately to my left Professor Maitri Wickramasinghe, who is the founding director, Centre for Gender Studies, University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka. She's professor in English, and she was founding director of the Centre for Gender Studies at that university. She's also a visiting professor at the School of Education and Social Work for the University of Sussex, United Kingdom. She's written extensively on gender mainstreaming, sexual and gender-based violence, women and development, as well as a feminist research methodology. She's got over 25 years of experience as a gender expert. She was recently in Australia with her husband, who is the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, and let me say that she could have been the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka easily with her background and experience as well. And I very much appreciated her words to us in Australia when she came recently. So thank you very much, Maitri. Then immediately to her left again, we have Dr. Patricia Lukuanen. She is a chairperson of the Commission of Higher Education in the Philippines. And she's a pioneer. She's one of our matriarchal women who's been, like Maitri, for many, many years working on these issues. She was the chair of the UN Commission on the Status of Women as a preparatory commission for the UN Fourth World Conference on Women held in Beijing, China in 1995. She's still working hard at it. She's come with us so far. She's not going to give up. She was served as chairperson of the ASEAN Women's Program, UNESCO Philippine Focal Point for Women, chair of the External Forum on Gender and Development of the Asia Development Bank, board member of the Centre for Asia Pacific Women in Politics. Patricia holds an MA, a Master's in Psychology from Cornell University, and a doctorate in Social Psychology from the Pennsylvania State University. So she's very learned, and she is a fighter for the good cause and has been for many years. We thank you, Patricia. Then immediately to her left, and we thank a gentleman for being with us as a male champion. His Excellency Dr. Ahsan Iqbal Chowdhury is the current Minister of Planning and Development of Pakistan. He also previously held the portfolio of Minister of Minorities and Minister for Education of Pakistan, which would have brought him very much to the forefront of considering gender issues. In 2016, Dr. Iqbal was appointed as the UN Development Programme's Champion Minister for the Asia-Pacific region in recognition of his efforts to promote the Sustainable Development Goals. Ahsan holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Engineering and Technology and an MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. So we very much welcome Ahsan. And then we have Ms. Erna Witola, who is currently the chair of the Partnership for Governance Reform in Indonesia, the Foundation for Local Governance Innovation and national coordinator of the Women's Movements for Planting and Nurturing Trees, which is fantastic. She is a co-chair of the Asia-Pacific Water Forum, a member of the Indonesian Working Group on Climate Change Adaptation, and is on the board of diverse CEOs such as the Indonesian Biodiversity Foundation. Erna is a chemical engineer from Bandung Institute of Technology and holds a Master of Science in Human Ecology from the University of Indonesia, Jakarta. Another powerful advocate for gender issues and the environment in particular. Then we have to her immediate left, Dr. Hei Su Shin. She's a member of the UN Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights and representative of the Korea Centre for United Nations Human Rights Policy. She's served as a member and vice chair of the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and was a member of the International Advisory Committee for the UN Secretary General's in-depth study of all forms of violence against women. Dr. Shin has also published many books, including on gender discrimination in education, as well as achievements and challenges in the Republic of Korea with regard to CEDAW and women's human rights. So Hei Su holds a PhD in sociology from Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. You get the spread of our countries, everybody. We're really very well represented in Indo-Asia. Now he's our Pacific champion. There's Andy Fong Toy, who actually holds a citizenship from New Zealand, but calls herself a true Pacific woman. I think born in Fiji. Yes. And Andy is the current Deputy Secretary General of the Forum Secretariat's Economic Governance and Security Program, which he took up in 2011. Andy has extensive experience incorporating research on Pacific legal issues. She's been an election observer on various missions, and prior to her appointment as director, she also served the Secretariat as International Legal Advisor and Legal and Political Officer. She holds a Bachelor of Laws from the Victorian University in New Zealand and Masters in International Relations from Deakin University, Australia, which is a great Victorian university, near where I come from. Can we give a clap to all those brilliant women and our man, who's also a champion in these matters? I just thought it was important to let you know who these women are, because we have such depth of knowledge, training and advocacy amongst our women, and don't ever let it be said that, oh, we'd love women to step up, but you know, there's not enough of them out there with any experience, or not enough women out there who've actually got much interest in these matters of bringing about a better outcome for all. Well, our panellists, I think you can see, are exceptional. Now, let's move to our first round of questions. There's about 5 minutes for each person, and we're going to keep strictly to time. We're meant to have a clock working down, but it hasn't quite begun yet. No. Can someone fix that up? The little... It will. Okay, that's good. And our first question is to Maitri from Sri Lanka. The question, Maitri, within the context of the 2017 Asia-Pacific FSD theme, eradicating poverty and promoting prosperity in a changing Asia-Pacific, what would you say are the root causes of inequalities faced by women and girls in the region? What's the cause? Why are we as we are?
I must confess, that this is a bit of a difficult question for me as a researcher who comes from a non-positivist background of research, given the assumptions of cause and effect and logic and linearity in the question itself, but I will try. So firstly, I think it is important to reiterate the fact that poverty affects men and women differentially as well as disproportionately, based on their sex and gender as well as other factors. We have all heard of the time-worn term, the feminization of poverty. But it's not only the question of numbers or the question of even sectors, but it's also a question of dimensions, multiple dimensions, as has been emphasized at this forum, particularly by Dr. Akhtar. Consequently, we are all aware of studies where women are seen as experiencing poverty more acutely, more distinctly, more multidimensionally, and in more compounded ways than men, perhaps due to the double burden of both paid and unpaid work, due to structural difficulties in accessing benefits, the differential impacts of, or the gender differential impacts of armed conflicts, due to personal insecurities, and differential impacts related to race and religion and caste and sexuality particularly. I know that the SDGs are very quiet on sexuality and LGBTQI identities, but that should not prevent us from integrating these where relevant. Secondly, it is also important to remember that depending on the context, poverty may impact women themselves differentially and disproportionately as well, given that women are not homogeneous groups. Yesterday's roundtable on SDG 5 saw the declining curve of women's labor force participation in South Asia, the corrosive effect of religious fundamentalism in Pakistan, girls who are trapped in child marriages, and we've updated on the increasing effects of environmental degradation on women's daily lives on small ocean islands. Therefore, we need to consider contexts in conceptualizing root causes of systemic inequalities. Root causes which may include oppressive socio-cultural ideologies and norms and practices relating to gender. I'm talking about pre-birth selection of male children, FGM, child marriages, ethno-religious edicts, and so on. Legal and policy-based discrimination, granted, much has been achieved since CEDAW and various UN initiatives to revise these, but there are still maybe institutional gaps such as pay differentials, the unequal division of labor in the household, and particularly the burden of unpaid and undervalued domestic work, leading to poor physical quality of life, particularly for women. And of course, we are going beyond literacy and infant mortality and life expectancy when we're talking about physical quality of life. We're talking about patriarchal and household power dynamics, which may constrain women's capacities to earn or control their incomes, and of course, sexual and gender-based violence. So in a sense, I think, Shaman, we can conceptualize other root causes as well that may prevent individual women and girls from maximizing on opportunities, even where and when there are opportunities available. I'm talking about the internalization of unequal and unequitable gender norms and values. I'm talking about the acceptance and normalization of vulnerability and oppression and disempowerment. I'm also talking about what can even be considered victim psyches, which may then perpetuate further inequalities, conveying that we may need to think in terms of cycles of impact or cycles of causes or cycles of vulnerability. For instance, disempowerment may have physical causes such as malnutrition and chronic depression, which may be caused by poverty and which may perhaps even lead to further poverty. Yet while tracing causes, whether in terms of root causes or cycles, while conceptualizing the ways in which these inequalities are also multiple and layered, It must be cautioned that we as development policymakers and practitioners must not portray women and girls as existing in complete and absolute and static states of vulnerability and disempowerment. In other words, let's not stereotype women and girls, because individuals may simultaneously experience degrees of vulnerability and capacity, oppression and privilege. And because my time is up, let me just say that, for instance, women may have seasonal employment, may possess hidden talents and capacities, and may have the courage to leave abusive relationships. So let's not see them as stereotypes, but take into account the facets and moments and phases of empowerment, capabilities, and even privilege and build around them when doing work on SDG 5 and interventional work on poverty, so as to make this goal meaningful and relevant for women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, important messages in there, Maitri. Patricia, no, we've got Erna next, haven't we? We have. Erna, the question in your view, what are the unique opportunities provided by the 2030 Agenda in addressing gender inequities in Asia Pacific? You know, these unique opportunities. How are women participating in and leading innovative efforts to promote sustainable development goals?
Thank you, Sharman. And I think it's not too late to have the gender special session this year, but also that it is really worth it to have a special gender session for the next few years, because gender is very specific and there is a very unique opportunities provided by the SDGs in addressing gender equality. From my experience in promoting the MDGs since 2003 in this region, gender, we have to work hard to get gender recognized as also not just on goal 3 and goal 5, but in all the goals, because poverty has a gender challenge. Yeah, what is it? Hunger and agriculture also, etc., etc. So now with the SDGs, it's really a big leap and really a very overwhelming commitments from the many women's group, UN agencies, governments with strong gender commitment, that now with the SDGs we have from out of the 17 goals, we have 12 goals, and out of the 300 something targets, 40 targets that are equally explicitly linked with gender equality, yeah? Also with human rights of women and girls. What does it mean? It's not just that gender something blah, blah, blah is in all those goals, but we can make sure that if any of the government, any of the stakeholders are working on poverty, whether they like it or not, it's there in front of their eyes that women and girls are important, and they have to make sure that they are not left behind. And so also to those working on creating decent jobs, it's so important to have that. And as we speak now in Indonesia, there is also a session between ASEAN countries to talk on the impact on the jobs for women because of ASEAN community. And so, and it goes on. Yeah? Those working in water and sanitation cannot ignore anymore the importance of women and girls to have access to water and sanitation. It's not happening yet. That's why we are so much behind in this goal with MDGs. And I'm so happy that now with SDGs, it is really moving forward. But that's not all. It's not just that in all those other goals are women important. A special goal 5 to achieve gender equality, yeah, is taking from all the input from CEDAW of 1979, from ICPD in 1994, and for the Beijing Platform of Action in 1995. And it has everything, all you can think about gender equality, from end of discrimination, eliminate violence, all the issues that are there, including political leadership, including universal access to health, reproductive rights, etc. So it is important that we now look at the bigger opportunities created by the SDGs to move with whatever we are doing to deepen our engagement in gender equality, yeah, with better collaboration. Your last question on women in sustainable development, I think it is, yes, there are so much work by women. One of that was what I was doing in planting trees, which sounds simple and small, but combine it with 7 big national organizations, and we planted millions and millions of trees and nurturing it, not just planting, but make sure that it's on. And so many women are working on applying together the environmental aspect, the economic aspect, and the social aspect of whatever they're working, be it the waste recycling, be it the advocacy for against cement factory or what have you, as well as also working on water and sanitation at all levels. So I think it is really timely that we have it now, yeah, and I congratulate ESCAP for taking this initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Una. Thank you. It might sound simple, just planting trees, but we know one of the problems with the planet is that trees are being removed at a rate which can't sustain our atmosphere. Assam, from your experience, what are the most effective strategies to maintain or to mainstream gender equality in national development and in planning in order that we achieve the 2030 agenda?
Thank you. First of all, let me say that how honored I am to represent the other half and have a gender balance on the panel. Otherwise, it would have been all women panel on gender issues. And also, I would like to say that, our Minister for Information, Ms. Mariam Aurangzeb, was actually supposed to represent Pakistan, but because the topic is so important, she could not travel. I chose to be here to give a strong statement in support of this program. I would say that while we recognize the challenges we face, we must also look at the glass half full. And when we do not appreciate and recognize what phenomenal changes are taking place for women empowerment in some of our societies, we fail to reinforce the momentum that is building up. Let me give you some examples from Pakistan. For example, if you go to any medical college today in Pakistan, 70% of the students are female students. If you go to any institution of higher learning, at least half of the students are girl students. In my own district, which is a very rural district and one of the smaller districts, we have 3,000 students in the university campus. Out of those 3,000, 2,400 are girl students. Very recently, I presided over a function where government distributes laptops to the students who achieve merit in the high school examination. Out of the 1,400 laptops they were distributed, 1,100 were girl recipients. So this is the revolution that is happening. And I have to tell the boys that in 10 to 20 years, I will soon be seeing that the house husband term or the profession will be the most popular, because most of you will be babysitting at homes and girls will be at all the good positions. So, I mean, we also have the other side that is happening, and I think we need to acknowledge and recognize some of the momentum that is building up. In the recent induction into the civil service, more than half of the civil servants in the premier service of civil service, which is Pakistan Administrative Service, are female officers. So these are some of the good things. What I would like to say that I think some interventions which really help are that government has recently mandated in most of the economic initiatives it has launched that 50% of those initiatives must include women recipients. For example, Prime Minister recently launched self-employment loan scheme. Prime Minister launched a major microfinance scheme. And in both these initiatives, there was a condition that at least 50% of the loan recipients must be women recipients. Now that we saw really helped us and enabled lots of young and new women entrepreneurs to start their businesses. And what research also shows that if there is a woman business person or woman recipient of microfinance, she is a much more responsible spender on her family and her children in terms of their education and health than the male recipient. So that actually has a multiplier effect for us in its social effects also. Similarly, government has also undertaken legislation to criminalize violence against women and discrimination against women. That has also helped. We have also encouraged women participation. Pakistan, again, is one of those countries which ensures participation of women in all political institutions from local governments up to the parliament. Right now, in a house of 342 members of the National Assembly, 60 seats are reserved and dedicated for women parliamentarians. And this is besides if they can get elected on a general seat. So these are reserved seats for them. And similarly, every local body, every provincial assembly has reserved seats for them that enables them to come and voice the concerns of the women.
Excellent. I think that's, Pakistan clearly has got some serious effort going on to change generations of imbalance. Now, Patricia, you are very skilled in education, training backgrounds and so on. We'll swap mics for you. In your opinion, how can we better equip women and girls in the region with the education, training and skills necessary to prepare them for the changing world of work?
Let me focus on 3 areas. First is expanding access for women and girls to education. And then second, ensuring that that education actually enhances their capacity. And then third, creating or developing a macro enabling environment so that the education of women and girls truly delivers what the benefits it is supposed to for gender equality. So first with access, as mentioned before, women are especially affected by poverty. So there is the need to address the economic barriers to education. So basically the actions, actually we reviewed what governments had done to implement the Beijing Platform for Action and the critical area of education. And there we found that a lot of them were instituting measures to abolish fees, including free school supplies, meals, transportation, uniforms, and housing. Also, we have to have measures to provide loans, grants, and scholarships to women and girls in order to incentivize women attending in school as well as completing their degrees. Also, there were funds allocated and should be allocated to special targets of disadvantaged women, basically such as victims of conflict, indigenous women, and women with disabilities. Now, capacity. It is important that the education that women receive truly enhances their capacity. So there is need to address the persisting problems of education. And we have found that despite increased participation, certain things still persist. For instance, gender tracking, where women dominate fields such as liberal arts, home economics, nursing, and teaching, while men dominate courses in law, agriculture, engineering, and natural sciences. So essentially, women are channeled into careers that are basically extensions of their domestic roles, while men get more marketable and competitive skills, for jobs. And even in fields where women dominate, such as health and teaching, in the occupational hierarchy, you will find that most women are at the bottom, but the very top positions are held by men. In a school, in education in general, and higher education also in particular, women are underrepresented in top leadership positions, full professors, those with what do you call it? Tenured positions and so forth. Actually, for instance, in the Philippines, it took 100 years for the University of the Philippines to finally have a woman president. And 70% of the presidents of state universities and colleges are men. Aside from gender tracking, one has to foster a gender-responsive school environment in the institutions where women are, and we have to address social barriers, including discriminatory social norms and gender stereotypes. We have to revise the school curricula and textbooks to embed a more gender-responsive approach. Also, we have to address campus-based violence, and have anti-sexual harassment policy and programs. It's also important to have assistance and counseling for women in difficult circumstances that prevent their completion of their degrees. Oops, I better rush forward because I'm looking at the time. The third area is creating an enabling environment. We have found that education is a necessary but not a sufficient investment for achieving gender equality. A range of underlying social and economic conditions need to be favorable in order for female education to actually deliver the benefits. Also, I must mention that we have to have proper laws in place. I know that one of the lessons from Beijing was that de jure equality or equality in law is necessary but not sufficient to equality in fact. But it sure helps. If the law is there, it helps. In the Philippines, we have been benefiting from the Magna Carta on women that has allowed us to do a lot of reforms. I have to end there, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patricia. And I know too, particularly in many African countries, but also in our region, just having toilets, lavatories in the schools for girls can mean girls can attend. And we don't always look at such basic necessities as that. So we move on to Jesus. What do you see, Jesus, as the current gaps in translating the fundamental human rights commitments on gender equality? We all agree they're human rights, but how do we ensure that they're translated into national realities in our region, in the Asia Pacific?
Thank you very much for the question, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about this issue at the Regional Commission of the UN in the UN building, UN Conference Center here. I think the best achievement during the past 70 years of the UN is to set the international human rights norms and standards. You know, we have the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, Beijing Platform, Declaration on the Right to Development. Other than CEDAW, there are 8 core human rights conventions, you know, that we all agreed with the participation of the governments. So we already have beautiful norms and standards on human rights, including women's rights. Yeah, so it is beautiful. Okay, how can we translate it into national realities? And that's where the gap appears. First of all, gender equality means there should be no discrimination, no violence against women. We all know that. We agree. Yeah. So what are the gaps? First of all, how about the laws in each country? You know, the laws, if the laws still contain discriminatory provisions, that should be eliminated, revised. You know, are the governments committed to do it? Are the society committed to do it? So I think the first of all, the legal discrimination should be eliminated. Second, what about practice? You know, although the law might be equal, but in practice, the parents discriminate the daughters compared to the sons. There can be many discriminations. So substantive reality should be realized. And I think at the bottom of that substantive discrimination is gender role stereotyping. And Hassan spoke about the Pakistan phenomenon of girls, out of 1,400, 1,100 girls took the laptop. Maybe the boys already have the laptop, so they don't need it, you know? Yeah, and nowadays we all know that women excel in exams. So they might be more than 50% of those who pass all these exams, bar exam or civil servants exam, but they don't have wives. Yeah, they should perform all these, you know, predominantly domestic, unpaid labor in childcare as well as housework. Yeah, so unless we change this gender role stereotyping, inequality would continue for, I'm afraid, how long? You know, perhaps 2 more centuries? I hope not. So we should get rid of this, and then we should pay special attention to those who need other assistance. What does it mean no one is left behind? Yeah? So the government should come up with temporary special measures or affirmative actions for women with disabilities, refugees, older women, poor women, you know, all these vulnerable or disadvantaged groups of women should be given extra assistance and special attention by the government as a policy, as a measure. Yeah. So, and then what is the gap? In terms of implementation, no, there should be implementation mechanism to commit all these human rights principles and norms into reality. And I think that is the gap exists because governments do not put priority on realizing gender equality in terms of implementation, you know. So it is only very small, you know, weak women's ministry who tries to, and then finance ministry, planning ministry, agriculture ministry, who has all the money and power, they do not put high priority. They might think that it is worthwhile, but they don't put high priority. So there should be a strong implementation mechanism with the participation of the rights holders, with the participation of civil society. And that's where I see the gap remains. So we have to realize these human rights principles and standards into the national realities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesus. Some very practical, sensible realities spelled out there. And I just think, for example, even in Australia, where we have now more women graduates than men in our universities, there's still, when they do the same jobs, whether it's in law or engineering or architecture or as teachers, there is a 17% pay gap between men and women doing the same job, which is, in fact, the experience of every nation on earth, including, you know, the Northern European countries, which we often are told to look to, all have that gender pay gap, and that is just not on. So last but not least, Andy, what are the key lessons learned from the Pacific in integrating gender equality across all the dimensions of sustainable development, the social, the economic, the environmental? What can you tell us from your research, your experience, the key lessons?
Thank you very much. At the outset, I'd like to note that there is very strong regional political commitment in the Pacific in support of gender equality, women's empowerment and sustainable development. And key among these commitments is the 2012 Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration, being the most comprehensive and far-reaching. The declaration focuses on 5 priorities which are aligned with the SDGs gender targets, namely gender-responsive government programs and policies, decision-making, economic empowerment, ending violence against women, and health and education. And we have since 2012 reported annually to our Pacific leaders on the progress of implementing their Gender Equality Declaration. At the sector level, our ministers of women have met and made several declarations in support of women's empowerment in the Pacific. And we have had 2 successive regional platforms of action for women's empowerment from 1994 to 2004, and more recently from 2005 to 2015. And almost all of our countries have ratified CEDAW. All of our countries now have national women's policies and action plans and agencies dedicated to gender equality and women's empowerment. And in 2015, our Pacific leaders committed to the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs, focusing on the unfinished business of MDGs, which included gender equality and poverty. Yet despite all of this, integration of gender equality and women's empowerment into our sustainable development efforts in the Pacific has not been easy. Until recently, with the exception of gender parity in education and maternal health, progress in many aspects of gender equality and development has been painstakingly slow, and we are lagging behind global processes. Only 3 of our 14 Pacific Island countries achieved MDG 3. We have the lowest level of women in parliament globally and some of the highest rates of violence against women, with relatively poor wage and economic outcomes for many of our women, especially those with disabilities and those living in rural areas and outer islands. So why the disconnect between the political commitment and policies with the less than impressive human development and gender equality outcomes? Let me highlight several challenges that have contributed to our slow progress. The first key reason is the failure, at least in the beginning, to place our efforts within the context of sustainable development and our cultural, religious, and societal values and ideals. Over the past decades, gender equality has been perceived as a Western construct that conflicts with our cultural and religious beliefs and perceived to be primarily driven by the UN, donor agencies, and women NGOs. Women's empowerment was often seen as an end in itself, and not necessarily also about a means to an end. Consequently, gender equality issues were seen primarily as a human rights and social agenda, with little acknowledgement of the role that women play in achieving sustainable development, nor of the differential impact of economic, environmental, climate change, and disaster challenges on women and men. Gender equality and women's empowerment were often perceived as a women's only issue and the responsibility of ministries of women's affairs. While most governments recognize the need to integrate gender equality and women's empowerment initiatives into national and sector plans and budgets, many struggle to do so. For instance, specific national women's machineries receive just 1% of total national budgets, and none of our Pacific countries have a system in place yet to track resource allocation to gender equality initiatives. There is limited data, human resource capacities, effective institutions, and funding resources needed to implement national efforts. And finally, of course, one of the biggest challenges is the socially entrenched cultural and religious stereotypes and perception of women and girls' roles in our societies. And these contribute to the perpetration of violence against women and girls and negatively impact outcomes in education, in the workplace, and in accessing and managing land resources. So in the few seconds that I have left, what are the lessons that we have learned and how can we do better for the 2030 agenda? And I think firstly, the most important key lesson is that political commitment is not enough. And what we must have is that this commitment must be owned, funded, and operationalized across government and non-government organizations at country levels. We must also acknowledge that women's empowerment and gender equality is a sustainable development issue. We must have policy coherence and integration, noting that progress in one aspect of gender equality does not necessarily positive impact on other aspects. And it's already been mentioned that women having higher education qualifications does not necessarily translate into better employment outcomes. And we still have the barriers to labour markets, the occupational stereotypes, and their traditional expectations about women in unpaid domestic and caring work. We also must have systematic national accountability, including accountability to national parliaments in implementing our national action plans. We need the sex aggregated data so we can measure equality. And gender equality must not just be driven solely by ministries of women, women NGOs and donors. We also need men to also support the initiatives. And finally, in a predominantly clan and communal society, empowerment of Pacific girls and women needs to be approached from a human and sustainable development perspective. And both girls and women need to be considered as agents of change in development and contribute to family, village, and societal development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. There's some very profound thoughts in there, and I have to say that you're right in pointing out that it's not just having the educational outcome of as many girls going to school, it's what happens with their education. Are they still, in fact, becoming child brides where their education ceases after a few years, where they, in fact, may never really experience economic independence and empowerment and are then subject to violence and a whole range of discriminatory practices, even though they were on the roll at the beginning of that year as one of the participants in education. We've come to the end of our first round of questions, and we started a bit late. We're wondering, have any of you got a profound question from the floor that you wish to ask panellists? Would you like to raise your hand if you have? Yes, we have. Someone from, not sure, you're sitting behind France.
So, I think, thank you all the panelists. It's indeed inspiring to see so many women and men on the floor. And my question is that while we're talking about gender mainstreaming, we realize that gender is more of a social issue, as all of you mentioned, and a mindset issue. And what are we doing about building tools or infrastructure which could really support these women? So a lot of educated women usually leave their careers at a point where they would like to, focus on their families. So how could we address basically solving these challenges in terms of tangible outcomes through some tools or infrastructure support is my...
Thanks for that question. And what are the tools? What are some of the instruments or mechanisms or policies or practices? And we've heard a few already from the panel, like quotas, like laws, regulations. Would anyone like to follow up on that question? Hey, Sue, you've got to start.
Thank you for the question. Actually, that issue is the normal questions that I ask to government delegation when we review the report on the implementation of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So how is the government going to provide infrastructure for childcare, for example? Yeah, because we all assume that women are doing all this unpaid labor for the sick, for the elderly, for the children, especially for the disabled, for the family members. So the governments needs to come up with the infrastructure to provide childcare, as well as there should be an equal distribution, equal sharing of responsibilities in the home between the family members, especially husband and wife. So there should be, I think it was also pointed out yesterday that there should be a time use survey. Yeah, how much time the husband spend in taking care of the children as well as doing housework. And it is striking that those whose wife is working, the husband is, in case of Korea, spend only additional 37 minutes, compared to the full-time housewives. So unless we change this, unless we don't change this, there should be no equality for women. And that is the base for all this gender pay gap and no equal representation of women in political and public life, as well as women should choose between whether to keep a career or, to stay in the house to do the family responsibility. So we need both at the societal level, all the policy measures and infrastructure, as well as change within the family. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If we don't do that, this will continue.
Okay, so it's a multifaceted, multi-pronged approach that we need, self-evidently, and each country and each part of many countries will be different, as we're acknowledging. What works in the back blocks of Pakistan may not work in New Zealand or may not be possible in Sri Lanka, given the different circumstances of each nation and region. Yes, please. Matri has a comment.
Just broaden that discussion a little bit. I think we've been using gender mainstreaming as one of the primary strategies to kind of alleviate the circumstances relating to women and children and so on and so forth. But it's been 30 years and you can see that the results have not been as as successful as was anticipated. So I think it's very important for us to think outside the box at this point, particularly with the SDGs, because the SDGs shows you a more integrated way of going forward. Consequently, if we think outside the box, okay, we have looked at, say, taken an issue like violence against women, we have seen it more in terms of protection for women. But now we need to think a little differently. What if, for instance, we take, teach girls self-defense, for instance, right? So to some extent, in that way, we need to think outside the box, particularly vis-a-vis the SDGs. That is my quick input.
Would anyone else in the panel like to make a quick input?
Infrastructure, probably missing infrastructure in most of the countries is daycare centers close to the working places. And if they are provided and ensured, that will provide much more opportunity for many women to join the workforce. And the second, I think, change that is very favorable that is happening is the flexible work environment that is emerging, because now it is much easier to work from home due to technology. Work from home is becoming more and more popular, even in the developed economies. So this flexible work environment is also, I think, one more opportunity where many more women will be able to join the economic area.
Anyone else got follow-up? But we've got 3, 4, about 5 more questions and we're running out of time. Would our gentleman at the front, I think you've had his hand up first.
Yeah.
That might be just about the last question.
One of the main areas of the concern is actually falling female participation in the labor force. In fact, some of the reports of the ILO, in some countries, particularly in this region. So I just want to request the panelists that what is the strategy they have been following in their own countries so that these trends of falling the female participation labor force goes, it is stopped rather, it goes up rather.
So your question is about participation of women in the workforce and how do we promote that? Yes, which is similar in line of questioning. Does anyone want to add to what they've said before about that? We've mentioned flexible workplace, childcare, education, self-evidently. There's issues of transport, of course, but there's also the cultural or gender norms of the country. I know in PNG, for example, we've done some research, and in Bougainville, where when a woman does in fact earn additional income, because she's working outside the family, perhaps, unless her husband or partner supports her in that work, she can simply be forced to hand over that extra cash. She doesn't, in fact, become empowered through it. He may, in fact, spend it on, say, alcohol, which promotes more violence and which ends up with an even greater difficulty for the woman and family. If the woman had had that cash, we know, and it was mentioned in the panel, she's more likely to spend it on education for the children, better food, nutrition, better shelter. The last person she tends to spend it on is herself. She spends on the family. So it's the norms as well as those points of things like having some safe childcare, affordable childcare, and so on. Does anyone want to make a final comment on that? And then we'll probably need to wrap up. But Patricia, we've got the next question, but we're thinking we're going to run out of time to do the next round of questions.
I would just like to reinforce what the Executive Secretary also referred to my comment yesterday. That my fear is that technology is going to displace maximum women in future from the areas where traditionally they have been very strong. For example, I think very soon we might have robots teaching in the schools. And now if women have been dominating the teaching profession, they are very vulnerable to the replacement by technology or a robot. Women have been in majority in shop in the arena of retail sector. Now all the retail jobs are under threat to be replaced, so they will be displaced. Women have been very strong in the secretarial functions. Now all the secretarial functions are under threat to be replaced by robots or automation, so they will be displaced. So this point of their low participation actually is further, I think, compounded. So therefore there is a great need to have a special task force, which I mentioned yesterday in the meeting, to evaluate, examine the implications of computers and robots on the workplace, on jobs particularly, and see that how women can be, the threat can be mitigated, particularly with its implications on gender.
Thank you. We're probably running out of time. Hussein, are you wanting to make a final statement?
Just very shortly, before we worry about disappearance of the jobs, I think the current situation is there should be Equal Employment Act in each country, which would prohibit discrimination in terms of giving employment. So, because the companies or the public jobs, they would presume that women would get married and then will soon quit. So that kind of idea, that should be prevented. And then once you get into the job, the second hurdle would be, what if you get pregnant, So women should not be dismissed in terms of pregnancy, in terms of childbirth, in terms of, so all these kind of discriminatory practices should be abolished. And how do you make that happen? You need to encourage the companies, like giving some exemplary, prize or woman-friendly working environment without sexual harassment, etc. So you need to have sticks and carrots and at the same time, I think. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Hazel. Well, I think we would have and many, many more questions from the floor. We've got someone right over the back, but we've run out of time for questions, haven't we? Big nods from the Secretariat, unfortunately. You can see the ladies up here and the gentlemen. Can you target them at lunchtime and ask them those questions? Right? Don't let them escape without you answering those questions. Can I just say in summary before I hand back to Madam Chair, and we're going to have country statements, I think the overriding message is equality for women. Achieving Goal 5 in the SDGs is not just a feel-good, it's not just about a feminist plot, it's not just about human rights such that human rights are key. It's not just because women are more than 50% of the human population. The reality is that unless women are standing shoulder to shoulder with men and girls with boys, then nations are never going to achieve their full potential in terms of peace and good order, environmental sustainability, their economic growth and stability, and it will take women in those leadership roles beside men to achieve those outcomes. So it's an imperative in terms of the social, economic and environmental outcomes, a triple bottom line that we need to achieve if our Indo-Asia Pacific region is going to enjoy a future that all of us would want for our children and our grandchildren. So can everyone join and applaud in acclamation our fantastic panel? I think as you can see we've got generations of expertise and experience and high-level advocacy amongst our panel of women and our friend from Pakistan. Can you all give them a big clap and don't fail to follow up with them. Thank you so much. And this was the first gender-specific part of one of these fora out of 4. Thank you very much, Secretary-General, for making it happen.
So thank you very much to our high-level panel and to Dr. Stone for ably moderating that high-level panel discussion. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I am now pleased to open the floor for the delivery of country and stakeholder statements under Agenda Item 3A, Strengthening Implementation of the 2030 Agenda in Asia and the Pacific. I have already in front of me all those countries and special groups who have signified their intention to deliver the statements. Please keep to the time, as you are actually the ones standing between all of us here and lunch. I implore on your commitment to SDG 2. Okay. So please keep to the limit of 3 minutes. May I now call on the distinguished delegate from the Islamic Republic of Iran.
In the name of God, honorable guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a distinct honor for me to attend and speak at this high-level panel discussion. At the outset, allow me to express my profound gratitude to the Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Mrs. Shemshad Akhtar, for her tireless effort and leadership to steering the work of ESCAP, especially those relating to girls and women in region. As all we acknowledge, never before have world leaders pledged common action and endeavor across such a broad and universal policy agenda. In fact, we are setting out together on the path towards sustainable development, devoting ourselves collectively to the pursuit of global development and cooperation, which can bring huge gains to all countries and all parts of the world. Although states reaffirm their commitment to international law and emphasize that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is to be implemented in a manner that is consistent with their rights and obligation under international law, but it is important that every state has and shall freely exercise full, permanent sovereignty over all its vast natural resources and economic activity. We also believe that in implementation of the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, no one must be left behind, especially women and girls. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, as we all agree that 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 associated targets are integrated and indivisible, mainstreaming of a gender perspective in the implementation of the agenda is of the crucial importance, and we must invest our full energy and resources as for its realization. In doing so, sustainable development cannot be realized without peace and security for all, including women, and peace and security will be at risk without sustainable development. For this reason, international community must redouble its efforts to resolve or prevent conflict and to support post-conflict countries, including through ensuring that women have a role in peace-building and state-building processes. Poverty is the main obstacle in achieving the goal of gender equality and women empowerment, particularly in this region. To ameliorate this situation, implementation of the Agenda 2030 as regard to the women and girls is very conditioned with the levels of cooperation, investment, knowledge sharing, infrastructure development, access to information technology, higher levels of education, so on and so forth. In the meantime, we need for further effective measures and actions to be taken to remove the obstacles to the full realization of the right of self-determination of women living under foreign cooperation, under foreign occupation, armed conflict, and the ongoing violence, extremism, and chaos, which continued to adversely affect their dignity, life, economic and social development, as well as their environment.
May I request you to wrap up, please?
In this regard, natural and cultural diversity of the world and fostering intercultural understanding, tolerance, mutual respect, and an ethic of global citizenship and shared responsibility is another area where we need to redirect our focus of attention and planning at national, regional, and international levels to move toward achieving the goals of sustainable development, especially the fifth goal. Honorable panelists, ladies and gentlemen, the Islamic Republic of Iran is determined to work for a significant increase in investment to close the gender gap and strengthen support for institutions in relation to advancement of women at the national levels. We believe that women and girls must enjoy access to quality education, economic resources, and political participation, as well as opportunities for employment, leaderships, and decision-making at all levels. In this regard, the approach of 6 5-year National Development Plan that is in line with the 2030 Agenda is focused on judicial justice, Islamic human rights, civil rights, and equal opportunities for all men and women, and access to judicial services. In the field of cultural science and technology for women and family, 8 goals are recognized, which include strengthening family functioning and status of women in it, escalating the level of female literacy, promoting economic empowerment and job opportunities, increasing the share of women in the comprehensive social security system, empowering the vulnerable women, promoting women's health, raising the social and cultural capital of women and family, and implementing meritocracy and gender balance in the management of community.
Thank you very much. Yeah, those are very important points, but we are really out of time. Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate from Iran. May I now call the distinguished delegate from Malaysia. Your intervention, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On gender equality, realizing the role of women in community and economic development, the government of Malaysia has consistently shown its commitment in achieving gender equality and promoting women's and girls' rights in the country. The National Policy on Women 1989 and the Plan of Action for Advancement of Women 1997 were reviewed and approved by the government in 2009. The National Policy on Women accords women equality of status and the same fundamental rights accorded to men as enshrined in the Constitution. The Plan of Action for the Advancement of Women was formulated to operationalize the National Policy on Women, and it has resulted in more coherent and focused programs to integrate women in development and further elevate their status in society. Malaysia is also a signatory to several international agreements such as the Cairo Programme of Action 1994, the Beijing Platform for Action 1995, and has ratified 2 very important human rights documents, the Convention of Rights of the Child and the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. In Malaysia's current 5-year national plan, the Ilan Malaysia Plan 2016 to 2020 emphasizes the inclusion of women by ensuring that women and girls' needs are addressed at the private and public domain. Notably, it will focus on strengthening the family institution and enhancing the role of women in development by creating a more conducive working environment and increasing the number of women in decision-making positions. Various measures have already been introduced, such as the implementation of the minimum wage on 1st July 2016, the introduction of incentives to encourage the establishment of childcare centers at the workplace, allocation of funds to agencies and ministries to establish childcare centers at the workplace, and extend maternity leave, fully paid, starting 2010 for civil servants from 60 days to 90 days currently. Malaysia is also committed to implementing at least 30% participation of women in the decision-making position. This target has been achieved in the public sector and is work in progress in the private sector, where in 2015, women in top management positions currently stands at 26.3%. Malaysia will continue its commitment to increase women participation in the labour force, and it is currently stands at 54.1% in 2015. For this purpose, the government has introduced several programs such as the Career Comeback Program to encourage women to return to the job market. The Career Comeback Grant was launched to provide financial incentives for women to implement programs to recruit and retain women who have been in career breaks. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate of Malaysia. Actually, you provided the answer to the question earlier of how governments can help promote women empowerment. May I now call the representative of the World Federation of the Deaf, Mongolia, to please give your intervention.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Dua Ditsa, and I'm very happy here to be representing women with disability. Within the Asia-Pacific region alone, 1 out of 6 individuals live with a disability, an estimated 650 million persons, most of whom are living in poverty. The main barriers are that women and girls with disabilities encounter more significantly than any other groups are the impact of poverty, gender inequality, which doubly discriminates against women and girls with disabilities, and thirdly, climate change. To address such significant barriers, we offer you a set of key recommendations. Mainstream the concerns of women and girls with disabilities throughout plans to implement the SDGs at the global, regional and national levels. Actively involve women and girls with disabilities in the planning, monitoring and evaluation of development programs. Take special measures to address the barriers faced by women and girls with disabilities in accessing justice, including by abolishing laws that limit their capacity to bring cases to court or to testify in court, providing training to justice systems actors to bring cases to court to testify in court, providing justice system actors, including those in the court system, and police forces about the right of women and girls with disabilities and requiring that justice systems ensure reasonable accommodation. And finally, the issues of persons with disabilities are not just the issues for disability groups here. We are members of all your groups. We are migrants, we are Indigenous, we are women, we are people living with HIV, we are youth, and because of this, we cannot achieve the full inclusion of persons with disabilities and therefore the SDGs without your help. We need you to make sure people with disabilities are included within your programs, your activities and your priorities. Because of this, we cannot achieve the full inclusion. For example, a simple change in the terms used to describe deaf and dumb schools or organisations. Language changes over time and in many leading countries around the world. The term dumb is no longer appropriate. I respectfully ask that all governments and organisations not use this term when referring to deaf persons. As civil society working together, we can truly make sure no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I have some delegates of, distinguished delegates of governments who were unable to deliver their interventions yesterday. So it appears we will be working through lunch. Your indulgence, please. But please, to all those making the interventions, please keep to the time limit. May I now request the distinguished delegate of Pakistan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate ESCAP on successfully convening this very important platform on sustainable development. I wish to assure full cooperation of my delegation in completing deliberations of this session. The 2030 Transformative Agenda for SDGs agreed in 2015 have entered in the second year of its follow-up and review. However, the scope and magnitude of the new Sustainable Development Framework remain challenging. Delivering on it would require unwavering political will and strong partnerships while putting people at the center and leaving no one behind at all. We strongly support measures to strengthen APFSD and convening this forum annually under a regular structure of UN ESCAP. We hope that the regional roadmap on the implementation of SDGs in forms, functions, and modalities of APFSD being discussed will be endorsed by this year's session at its outcome. Madam Chair, we are living in a highly connected and globalized world. Impact of economic, social, and environmental changes in one part of the world are felt across countries. Pakistan attaches great importance to sustainable development goals, and they complement our development needs and national priorities. We would also like to propose that Goal 9 must be expanded to recognize the role of technology in development. We are active participants in consultative deliberations for setting up the 2030 Agenda. We are among the pioneers who adopted SDGs in its development framework. Our parliament was the first parliament to adopt SDGs as national development goals and to form an SDG unit in the parliament. The government has embedded SDGs in the long-term development framework Pakistan Vision 2025 being monitored by Planning Commission. In addition, government's 5-year plan, a nationally agreed upon document with broader ownership, also follows up on implementation of various SDGs. A special $200 million fund has been created to supplement spendings by the provincial governments by the Prime Minister to implement SDGs agenda. Next year, it will be increased to $250 million. The detailed work is being carried out on developing a list of 241 global national indicators, which will continue till March 2017. The government has initiated mainstreaming SDGs into national development planning, mobilization of resources, and monitoring progress at all levels. The government recently also held a local government summit in which all leaders of local governments issued a declaration of owning the SDG agenda and localizing the targets. Pakistan believes in collective efforts of the region to fight poverty and hunger in the region. The poverty-hunger situation in South Asia is more precarious than in any other part of Asia-Pacific region. Therefore, needless to add, the need for peace and collaboration at regional level cannot be more re-emphasized. Government of Pakistan would like to assure the full support and commitment towards the implementation of the steps mutually agreed upon by this forum for greater benefit of the people of the region. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Pakistan. Indeed, given the long-term planning horizon, long-term horizon for the Agenda 2030, we really need to look forward. And I think it's really time that we start looking at the role of technology in sustainable development. May I now call again the distinguished delegate from the Islamic Republic of Iran? Oh, thank you. May I now call in the distinguished delegate of Indonesia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to national progress and achievement, especially in relation to this year's topic of poverty eradication and prosperity enhancement, Indonesia has significantly reduced the prevalence of extreme poverty from 28.32% in 2006 into 8.8% in 2015 and further into 7.5% last year. We have attempted this through various programs and policy interventions at several different fronts, considering the multidimensional nature of poverty. This includes, among others, conditional and non-conditional cash transfer, universal health coverage, cash transfer scholarship for poor students, rice subsidy for the poor, microcredit programs, and others. Yet, we acknowledge that much more needs to be done, and therefore we should not be complacent. At the core of the challenges, we believe, is chronic poverty, namely poverty that cannot be eradicated by economic growth alone, poverty that is multidimensional in nature and involves the issues of social inclusion, food security, health, and education, among many other factors. In this regard, we would like to underline that follow-up and review mechanism at the global and regional levels must link effectively with national efforts. The end goal must be to support national implementation based on the country's actual needs, and the product is a revitalized global partnership for means of implementation. We also would like to recall our discussions during the roundtable earlier today, where many references were made on the need to implement the SDGs through an inclusive manner. Indonesia firmly subscribes to this principle. We are fully committed to ensure that no one is left behind, both in terms of development planning and development gains. And we therefore involve all relevant stakeholders, including CSO, private sector, and academic circle, as an integral part of our national SDG implementation team. During our discussions these 2 days, many of us have also raised the importance of data. Indeed, the availability of quality data is very crucial to measure progress and to identify existing gaps. And in this regard, Indonesia would like to underline that not only data must be available, it must also be measurable and understandable. Towards the direction, Indonesia has formulated the so-called metadata, consisting of definition, measurement, data sources, frequent dissemination, and availability of desegregation. The end goal is to achieve one data policy with standardized concept and definition of data that comes from various sources. Finally, Indonesia is also one of the countries that will be participating in this year's voluntary national review, and this reflects Indonesia's firm commitment to the 2030 agenda, including its follow-up and review mechanism. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate of Indonesia. You mentioned a number of important points there, how it's much more difficult actually to resolve the issue of chronic poverty. And then your initiative on data is actually something that we should be learning more about. Okay, may I now call in the distinguished delegate of Vietnam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the Vietnamese government fully supports the gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. And I would like to take this opportunity to share Vietnam's experience in gender equality. Vietnam has been successful on MDG 3 with all major indicators being fully achieved. By 2014, there was no significant difference between literacy rates and education attainment across all educational levels between males and females. In higher education, university and college, the percentage of male and female lecturers are now close to equal. A ratio of grades between male and female workers in non-farm sector has been narrowed to 100 to 6.7% in 2014. And in Vietnam, we have the National Strategy on Gender Equality for 2011-2020. We have also developed indicators for gender equality, and gender issue has been mainstreaming into National Development Plan. Vietnam has developed the National Action Plan for the implementation of Agenda 2030 last year, and the NAP covers 17 goals, in which the goal number 5 has been adjusted as achieve gender equality, empower and create enabling opportunities for women and girls. And in order to enhance gender equality and empowerment of women and girls, we identify some activities that should be paid attention to as follows. First, to issue policy to strengthen the capacity of female workers in public servant, civil servant. Second, to make increased efforts in overseeing the implementation of law on gender equality and the national strategy on gender equality, with particular attention given the mainstreaming of gender equality into normative legal documents. Third, carry out information communication advocacy work in order to increase the awareness and change the behavior of leaders, policymakers, and entire society with regards to gender equality and the role of women in politics. Next, formulating training program on economic development modalities for women with particular attention paid to training on application of information providing technologies. Next, provide advanced job training, particularly in the occupation that have the potential labor mobility in the ASEAN regions. Next, create enabling conditions for women to access and utilization of ICTs. And finally, to create platform both at national and international to share best practice, lesson learned to promote the participation of women in the economic activities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate of Vietnam, and congratulations on your accomplishment. Truly, you really need that government push to be able to achieve this goal on gender equality. I now call in the distinguished delegate of Kazakhstan to please deliver your intervention.
Спасибо большое. So, can I speak Russian? Yeah? No interpretation?
There's no interpretation, sir.
No interpretation. Well, in fact, I have my speech prepared in Russian. Okay, nevertheless. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear chairperson, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak up in front of this audience. And let me congratulate ESCAP with the coming the 70 years jubilee. Kazakhstan worked for Kazakhstan has 25 years of independence, working for the goals of United Nations. We have successfully completed the Millennium Goals and now starting to work on SDGs. The SDG completely meets requirements of the development goal of Kazakhstan, and recently we adopted 2030 goal of strategy of Kazakhstan, which has 100 concrete steps and 5 institutional reforms. All these, all 17 goals of SDG was integrated into our 100 concrete steps. Currently, we would like to thank United Nations for the support of all initiatives of Kazakhstan, namely National Agency for Official Support, Astana Hub for preparation of civil servants, Special UN Program for Central Asia's countries, International Center for Green Technologies, and etc. And one of the things that I want also to share with you is that Kazakhstan during its independence reformed several times the statistical agency and methodologies. Therefore, we have great experience to share with other countries, and we would like to share our experience with the Central Asian. So because we have similar agencies, we have similar structure of economy, so and we are willing to share this experience and requesting ESCAP to help us to implement this initiative. So at the end, I would like to say that This year we are holding the Expo, Astana Expo 2017. The main theme of this Expo is green technologies, and we think it will greatly contribute to the regional development of the proliferation of green technologies. Therefore, we request UN ESCAP and other member states to take active part in this forum, in this expo. At the end of my speech, sorry for being short, because I prepared everything in Russian. So I would like to thank once again for giving me this opportunity to speak up to this audience. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Kazakhstan, and thank you for indulging our need for an English translation of your speech. And best of luck on your expo. May I now call in the representative from the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. Okay, so may I now call in the representative from the Foundation for Women.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am from the Women constituency of the Regional Civil Society Mechanism. Madam Chair, I would like to point out that the most comprehensive research conducted in the conditions that allow changes in policy and practice to advance gender equality across the global and across 20 years found that the single most important feature in countries that advanced women's rights was the existing of autonomous feminist movements. One of the root causes of women's inequality is also the prevailing economic model that perpetuates and often relies on the systematic discrimination and disadvantage experienced by women in order to generate growth. Women's cheap labor is viewed as the source of competitive advantage for corporations, thereby keeping women's wages low. The promotion of public-private partnerships in the context of the Agenda 2030 implementation is alarming, as we have seen that when privatization or cuts on social services happens, women are forced to fill in these gaps with their unpaid care work. As many women remain in the informal sector, they are denied the decent wages, better working conditions, and social protections as their counterparts in the formal sector. The other feature that needs addressing is the clear consequences of the current political climate, rising authoritarian governments both in our region and notoriously in other parts of the world, coupled with enormous inequalities of wealth and the impact of climate change are all gendered threats, as I have experienced in the Pacific. Challenging gender inequality, therefore, requires directly challenging economic policies, institutions, and accounting that have entrenched social inequalities and often undermine the regularity capacity of states. Therefore, we believe that the regional roadmap needs to include a focus on the coherence between trade agreements and Agenda 2030. It also requires the adoption of an expansive notion of women's empowerment that goes far beyond the idea that women are economically empowered when, as proposed by the World Bank, they have the agency to compete in markets. If women's empowerment is to mean anything, it must extend to strengthening women's capacity to exercise real power and control over land, natural and alternative resources, their control over their bodies, and freedom to express their sexuality without violence or coercion or discrimination, and most importantly, their own lives. Therefore, we call upon all member states to ensure through affirmative actions the participation of women and girls in development, decision-making at all levels, including the localization, implementation, monitoring, and reporting processes of the SDGs. Member States' commitment on gender equality should not be limited within Goal 5. It should be viewed as a cross-cutting commitment across all of the Agenda 2030 goals. The future women want is one where we shift the current model of development, one that is just and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for articulating those points. May I now call in the representative from the YP Foundation.
Respected Chair, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am Shovik Pine from the YP Foundation in India. As a part of the Youth and Children constituency, I want to reiterate the importance of gender equality from a youth perspective in achieving the SDGs. The seeds of gender inequality are set in from birth and perpetuates through the growing years. Largely, gender equality incorporates gender binary approach, which marginalizes the identity of LGBTQI. Thus, intervention at the structural and institutional aspects which sustain gender inequalities needs to be targeted. All forms of gender violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or mental harm includes threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life, thus needs to be addressed for all, and necessary knowledge around it often has the farthest reach for young people, especially women and the LGBTQI. These are critical areas for all young people to be informed about, aware of, and to be able to grapple with and strategize on. The education sector has a critical role to play in preparing children and young people for their adult roles and responsibilities by equipping them with necessary skills and imparting them adequate information to make responsible choices in their social and sexual lives. The health sector often assumes a gender-blind approach by placing adolescent and young women as future mothers, further deepening the gender norms and stereotypes. In the light of the immense potential youth have to contribute for achieving SDGs, but would not make the desirable impact if gender inequalities continue to exist, we would like to make the following recommendations. Ensure adequate quality of comprehensive sexuality education, which promotes gender equality. The curriculum should align with the best practices in the region and worldwide to integrate the 7 key elements of gender, sexual and reproductive health and HIV, sexual rights, pleasure, freedom from violence, diversity, and relationships. Ensure gender-sensitive as well as gender-transformative adolescent health programs and policies. Implement rights-based approach in alignment with international covenants and treaties to address gender inequalities by repealing discriminatory laws. Recognize the role of media in shaping young minds towards harmful gender stereotypes and norms and address them adequately. Overarching across all SDGs, ensure meaningful youth participation in all stages, including planning, implementation, and monitoring to promote gender equality. And also incorporate process and qualitative indicators and not just quantitative and outcome indicators to address gender inequality. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the representative from the YP Foundation, and for emphasizing that gender equality is goes beyond this binary male-female classification. Are there any other governments or major groups that wish to deliver an intervention? So I guess that's it. Thank you all for those insightful and interesting remarks and for an excellent session. Okay, sorry, it's too late. It's now time for lunch. So we'll see each other in the plenary after lunch. The MC has some announcements to make. Thank you.
Yes, we still have side events going on with lunch provided. So you may catch up with 30 minutes, 40 minutes, yeah, lunch. So meeting room H, meeting room F, it's the importance of civil registration and vital statistics to eradicate poverty in Asia and the Pacific. You may visit the engagement space where the networking session of KU University and presentation on global environmental system leaders is happening right now. It's just on the left-hand side of the CR2, and lunch is provided. Technology and sustainability side event organized by India is in meeting room A. So this lunch break will be provided until 1:30. Thank you very much.